it is a challenge to look at your physical self and see how it's changing, and not necessarily in the way you would like. And then to go beyond that and to try to put that aside and to honor the fact that you're still upright. I mean, there's some days when I say, I'm standing, I'm upright, I can put one foot in front of the other.
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I created this podcast to give you inspiration and let you know you're not alone in feeling stuck in midlife. I also invite you to join the Age Agitators Club for women, where we come together monthly to hatch our plans for making waves as we age. Being part of this community for women will remind you on a regular basis that you're not too old, and it's never too late to do that thing you've been thinking about. You can find more information at latebloomerliving.com/community, and I hope to see you there. Hello, my friend. Oh, we're going to have some fun today. I have a guest to bring you. Her name is Jane Leader. She is the host of a podcast that I enjoy very much. It's called Older Women and Friends. I was recently a guest on her podcast, but I have listened to other episodes and really enjoy it. I definitely suggest you give her a listen over there. Now, before she was a podcaster, she was a writer, which I think is one of the reasons why I really enjoy her podcast. I feel like that her background as an author comes through in her storytelling on her podcast. So that's pretty cool. She's the award-winning author of Dead Serious, which won a book award for young adults series. And her second edition of that same book reached #1 on Amazon's book for teens and young adults about suicide. She has been honored as a guest author at the Carl Sandburg Literary Awards. She's was born in Detroit, Michigan, the Motor City, the original home of Motown. She is a baby boomer who came of age in the 60s. And you know what I really can't wait to talk to her about? In her bio, it says that she is fascinated by the complexities of relationships between generations, between genders, and between our personal and public personas. So I'm really excited to talk about all of those things with her. Jane, thank you so much for being with me today.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for that introduction. I feel very important and professional.
Oh my goodness. So I am so glad that you said yes to coming on as a guest. And I want to talk to you. I think one of the things I'm most curious about is what made you decide to start a podcast?
Well, I'll give you the short version. It was on my 75th birthday, and I had a friend who happens to be a therapist, and she said, "Oh, so what is it that you want to accomplish in this new year?" And I said, I don't think I want to write another book. I don't want to spend 3 years of my life in isolation, researching and reading. That's not how I want to spend my time. Well, I said, what's most important is the health of my family, my friends, and myself. So that's certainly something I hope that will be achieved. I don't really want to watch. I don't really want to work on feature pieces. I don't want to go through the whole pitching process and the rejection letters and the pile of rejection letters, that I could use to start a bonfire on a cold evening here in the, Midwest. And then I don't know where this came from. I really don't. I said, I want to do a podcast. And she started squealing and she said, oh my God, that's what I was going to say. That's what I thought. And it was like, I got that kind of little push over the edge. And that was that. So after researching, and as you know, coming up with a title that's unique, but still is interesting enough, and coming up with the music and finding an audio engineer and trying to figure out my mission. It took several months, as I'm sure you can appreciate, before I was ready to hit the ground running. But that, and the fact that I am an older woman, I was 75 then, I am 78 now, and will be 79 in a couple of months, which is just a complete freak out. A lot of older people say, well, I don't really feel my age. I don't really feel my age. I do from time to time on a physical level. I'm sitting for a long time and I stand up and I have to kind of shake my limbs to get all the juices flowing
That happens
and
to
the
me
oil,
now, Jane.
back in all of my limbs and my joints. But I'm a happy camper and so grateful that the muse landed on my shoulder that day and said, Jane, you should do a podcast, because I wake up in the morning and I'm excited. I look forward to what it is that I'm doing. I also have free time, so I can take a dance class or a Pilates class, or I can meet a friend for lunch or to hang out in the garden. So I feel like I have the best life that I possibly could have at this point.
That's amazing. Did you immediately know what your topic was for your podcast, or was that a kind of what would the podcast be about? Oh, it could be this, it could be that, could be this, could be that.
I never skipped a beat. I knew that I wanted to do something about older women and younger women who interact with them, on many, many different levels. I had a mission, and it was to, again, it's not necessarily unique, but to look at stereotypes that surround older women, to hear the stories from older women so that people who are listening go, wow, that's cool. Oh, that sounds interesting. Oh, she's very smart and active, and to kind of blaze the trail, set the scene so that younger women can look at older women and say, it's not something to fear. It's something in many ways, not physically, but in many other ways of looking forward to.
I love that. Older Women and Friends. First of all, I love the title. And when you started it, wanting to have these conversations, was it just to talk about and highlight interesting women doing interesting things? And was that kind of where you saw it all going?
Well, you and I talked on our episode of Older Women and Friends, and we talked about the importance of stories. And
Mm-hmm.
so, first off, I wanted to hear stories from older women about themselves and what they're up to and what they've learned and life's lessons, and also to hear from younger women who are fascinated and are smart and can see. I'll just take one example, self-care, and the way self-care is defined in our society is having facials and buying all kinds of anti-aging serums and goop and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And yet self-care really comes from within, correct? I mean, it is taking care of ourselves, and it's much more internal. And I enjoy talking about that and having an expert who spends her life thinking about that and writing about that. And then I appreciate younger people's opinions because, oh my God, if you see any of these ads on television or print ads where they've got like an 8-year-old who's thinking about Botox, or an 11-year-old who's going out and buying a certain facial cream because it's anti-aging. Wow, that is so far from at least how I grew up and women in my age grew up, and I'm startled by that, and I'm also sickened, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I am with you.
So part of what I do is not going to necessarily reach that audience, but maybe it will reach their mother or their grandmother or just a family friend who can pick that up and, talk about how beautiful we are, whether, we've got wrinkles and crepe paper skin, because, hey, you're not going to escape it unless you want to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars every couple of years to have your face fixed and your arms fixed and your belly removed and all this other stuff. And I might add, in many cases, end up looking nothing like yourself. It's like, don't mess with it, just take it as it goes.
It's hard. And I can totally see why women have work done. I get it. You know what I mean? No judgment on it. But for me personally, it's not something I would do because I've just seen how it goes wrong and they don't look like themselves anymore. I don't know. I think there's a certain amount of self-acceptance that I wish for everybody as they get older, you know?
It's not easy. I'll be the
No,
first to
no, it's
admit,
not.
and it is challenging because we're not a society who is honoring the crone, who is honoring the wise older woman. That is the way it used to be. A matriarchal society. It ain't that anymore. It hasn't been for quite some time. So it is a challenge to look at your physical self and see how it's changing, and not necessarily in the way you would like. And then to go beyond that and to try to put that aside and to honor the fact that you're still upright. I mean, there's some days when I say, I'm standing, I'm upright, I can put one foot in front of the other, I'm going to take a dance class, I'm going for a long walk. And it's a balancing act. And I say in the introduction to Older Women and Friends that what I have come to embrace at this point in my life is the fact it's the way in which we are able to adapt to change, because life is always changing and life changes much faster the older we are. And our ability to say, okay, that's interesting. I just had an age jump day. I'm not feeling my energy, my creativity. It's like, I feel like going back to bed. But if, because aging, like any other stage, there are ups, there are downs, there is status quo, and there are no guarantees ever. So my feeling is that the skill that is most important is the ability to adjust to those changes.
Yeah. That is what I am leaning into and hoping for. I'm hoping I could, you know what I'm saying? I'm hoping that I can be that way as I get older. And I will say, I feel better in my own body at 55 than I did at 45, for sure.
And you'll
You
hear a
know?
lot of that from women, and you also hear that older women like myself are one of the happiest demographics. I don't know if it's in the world, but certainly in the United States. And there have been studies that research, I think they call it the happiness curve.
Mm-hmm.
However, and so a lot of what I read and what people have written says that this is the happiest time of our lives. And yet I think I heard recently that some of that research has been debunked. So I don't really know what the truth is on that. I can just base it on myself, on my friends who are in the same age group, and Yeah, we're happy. I mean, there's this whole issue of invisibility, and I know you talk about it and I talk about it, and it has to do with the reality in our society that older women are invisible. They're not taken as seriously. They're no longer the objects of attention. Their opinions are often poo-pooed. If they're in a business meeting, yes, they have a place at the table, but they're not really encouraged to engage and contribute. So I hear a lot of women saying that that invisibility also can be a positive thing because nobody really is paying any attention. So they can do and say whatever they want. There is a certain freedom,
Mm.
freedom from society's expectations and stereotypes. So I hear that a lot from women. And as you said, you feel much better in your body at 55 than at 45. Same, same. Now my age skews a bit, so I'm really curious. I talk to women, I listen to women, and I hear that quite a bit.
Fascinating, huh? Hey, we're going to take a quick break here so I can tell you about an awesome resource that I think you're going to love. Here's the thing. We are always works in progress. Do you find yourself wondering, what do I want to be when I grow up? If so, then I think you're going to want to subscribe to We're All Getting Older, which is a weekly newsletter written by Lou Blazer that's all about continuing to grow and get better in the second half of our lives. We're All Getting Older is a sponsor for this podcast, and I'll tell you, I get so much benefit from reading Lou's newsletter every week, and I think you will too. She writes the newsletter for midlifers who believe in getting better as we get older and making the most of life's second half. So if you want to subscribe to that, it is on Substack, and you can easily find a link to subscribe at loublazer.com. That's loublaser.com. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. So what have you learned about yourself since you started your podcast?
What have I learned about myself? Good. I've learned some very positive things, and particularly as a podcast host, I'm able to take skills and tools that I have developed over decades, and somehow they all are being called upon at this particular time in my life. So I am first and foremost an author and a journalist. So there's writing involved, right? I mean, at least for me, there's the introduction, there are the show notes, there are the interview questions. I also, because I've written a ton of books and interviewed hundreds of people, I like to think that my interviewing skills are well honed. The jury may be out on that, but that's what I think. The ability to express myself, and sometimes I get really tangled up in my words. Sometimes it's like, cut, please, can we start that over again? That made absolutely no sense. But the ability to laugh at myself, to say, okay, well, I messed that one up, take two, and, just to keep on trucking. And I've also learned that there are some people out there who like listening to me and like listening to my guests and come back for more. So yeah, it's been a great experience. I know yours has as well. I have no interest in cutting that off anytime soon.
That's fantastic. And do you have anything coming up that you're excited about?
I am going to interview tomorrow a woman by the name of Dr. Catherine Etsy. and she is on the cusp of turning 90. She is a therapist still working, a sociologist still working. She is an author, and her book right now is, I don't have the title in front of me, but it has to do with living the best life you can in your 80s.
I love it. I can't wait to listen to that.
Yeah. So, and she's so excited to do this. I've gotten so many, emails and can't wait to do this, can't wait. And she wrote a New York Times opinion piece a couple of years ago, and that may have been where I heard about her. And she talked about some really interesting things like we are living with death as a neighbor. So basically, let's get it going because the meter is ticking. I want to know, what is it like to live with death as a neighbor? She also talks about what she has found as life's most important understanding is the importance of family and friends and keeping that circle as strong as possible. Yeah, it's hard. There are people who are dying. There are people who are sick. There are people who move away. There are people who no longer have much in common with you, but it takes some effort. But this naturally decreasing circle needs to get a little shtuk so that it can grow again. And I hear all the time from people who talk about the importance of that, of friendships, of intergenerational friendships. That is someone who is much older as friends with someone who's much younger, or vice versa. And I'm trying to think, she said something else that I just read. Oh, I know. So during the pandemic, she said she and her boyfriend were kind of running back and forth, and sometimes they'd spend time at her place and sometimes at his. But with COVID, they were told, you guys got to settle in. We can't have you moving back and forth. And so they moved in together.
That's awesome.
And they had a blast, and they had someone to talk to, someone to share books with and films with. So she said, there was all this doom and gloom about, if you're 65 or older, your chances of getting COVID are extreme. And so you must be vigilant. And she said at a certain point, it was like, hey, we were having a good time. I was not going to let the fact that people in my age group were necessarily more prone to getting COVID. And I just was giggling and giving a fist pump. So that's who I'm going to be meeting and interviewing tomorrow.
Wow. Wow. Talk about life goals. That sounds amazing. Yeah, that whole idea of regenerating, friendships as you get older and you've gone through the loss of friends around you and siblings and parent, I think of my mother-in-law who is 95 and plays bridge 2 times a week with a group of women. And that is her lifeline, and she's so hilarious. She goes to the doctor, which, is more frequent these days. And she'll say, I don't know anybody who gets as much out of a doctor's appointment than I do. I just love, I get out and I'm out of the house and and she has not stopped being social. She has not stopped, you know, pushing herself to do that. I
And
can't wait to hear that episode.
Sky Bergman, whose documentary I think is called Lives Well Lived. And as I watched that and listened, I picked up on the fact that not only are friendships essential, having a sense of humor.
Mm.
even being self-effacing. Gloria Steinem was the keynote speaker several years ago at the San Miguel de Allende Writers Conference. And that's a pretty big conference with people coming from all over the country. And the thing I loved about her the most was her ability to laugh at herself. There were things that she said, or she was talking about experiences that she found absolutely hysterical. And she was not afraid to say, yeah, I mean, that happened that day. And then I bumped into him and I'm making all this up. And, he fell down and he has whatever. She was so approachable, so lovable, and so at ease with herself that she could tell some little tales, about herself or about people in her life. And she thought it was a gas. So I really think the ability to laugh and to laugh at ourselves. Memory issues, well, that's fun. There's no doubt about it. I'm forgetting my phone number, stuff like that. And at this point, I just turn it into a game. It's like, okay, how many seconds or minutes or days is it going to take me to remember that person's name that I knew like, a best friend, and I have no idea who she is or what to call her? That stuff happens. So, you either got to go with the flow, and it sounds corny, but honestly, again, it has to do with transitions from really sharp memory and a great student, and then suddenly you can't remember your phone number. Okay, that takes a little bit of adjusting to,
Yeah.
but there are all kinds of things that we can do to enhance our memory, to enhance our brain power. And, it's like, okay, so yeah, I guess I'll start trying to learn Italian. Or who knows, I'll become the New York Times Sunday crossword puzzle expert, winner, the best, whatever it is, whatever you can find to do to keep things well oiled. Just like, as I said, when I stand up sometimes, I got to kind of move around a bit and get that oil flowing throughout my joints, my body, before I can actually stand up and walk as if I don't have a broken leg or a broken hip.
Yeah,
Oh dear. Yeah, it's a
absolutely.
gas. It's really interesting. I guess I'm having a good time.
Aging is not for the faint-hearted. It just
No.
isn't. But it's I love talking about it with somebody like you who has a sense of humor about it, who is, you keep trucking and you're intrepid and to start a podcast later in life is no mean feat. It's a lot of work to do a podcast, and I just am watching you and feeling all kinds of inspiration.
Oh,
So thank
thank
you
you
for
very
that.
much. Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
That's good.
absolutely.
Yay, go team.
Where can people find you?
You can go to oldwomenandfriends.net to get to the podcast.
Fantastic. And you're pretty active in LinkedIn too, aren't you?
I have found LinkedIn to be one of the best social media platforms for me. I've just met a lot of fascinating, interesting people, and I feel appreciated when I'm on LinkedIn because there are these fabulous, interesting people who want to comment on what I have to say, positively or negatively. But there's some interaction, which is unlike some of the other schemes that you and I have come up with to try to open up, conversations with guests and other interesting people. And it's like, did anybody get in contact with you today? No. Have you heard from anybody in the last year? Not really. So it's like, Hey, she's laughing. I'm glad. I do. You asked about what I've learned about myself as a podcaster, and I think I also have to add feeling comfortable with my sense of humor because it's not something that I've always been upfront with. And yet, hey, I like to laugh. I like to make people laugh. And I feel more and more comfortable doing that. So thank you for giggling over there on the other side of the screen. I
I love your
appreciate it.
sense of humor. That's
Thank
one of the
you.
things that I like most about you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been tremendous. I can't wait for everybody to hear this episode and just thank you for your time.
Thank you, Yvonne. I deeply appreciate it. Adios.
Well, there you have it. I love Jane's spunky way of just doing what she wants to do. There's a certain playfulness to her podcast, to her approach to things, and I am totally inspired by that. So if you want to check out Jane's podcast or learn more about her, I will have links in the show notes for you. Just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and you can get connected with Jane. She's awesome. And speaking of playfulness, how are you feeling? Have you been playing enough? Here's a question for you. Do you ever get a twinge of guilt when you are enjoying a playful moment? Like you should be doing more grown-up stuff instead? Like does your to-do list just suddenly pop into your head and you're like, what am I doing? I should be going and getting stuff done. It happens to me for sure. We get older and suddenly play is a luxury, or it's considered to be a luxury. But we've got to stop denying ourselves. It's not good for you. Play actually helps to keep us healthy. Taking those mind breaks is good for us and helps us focus when we actually need to. We're naturally wired to learn through play as children, and yet somehow we think it's self-indulgent and irresponsible once we become adults. So, this is your invitation to join me in the Unlocking Playfulness Play Shop, which is coming up Saturday, May 4th. It's going to go from 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time to 1:30, and it's going to be in Zoom, so you can join from anywhere. You can get more information and register at latebloomerliving.com/play. And I'd want to invite you to disrupt your day with play and see what it does for you. Come join us. On another note, Mother's Day is right around the corner. And if you don't have your copy of In Full Bloom, A Guide to Aging Playfully, then I think it's time to drop some hints, folks. You can also find that on my website. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Next week is the beginning of a 2-part installment for Mother's Day with 2 different guests sandwiching Mother's Day on either side. So in the meantime, have a great week. Stay safe and well. Talk soon.